Death may look like the end, but according to ancient Gnostic texts, it's not what you think, because what happens after we die isn't about judgment or eternal rest. It's about escaping a cosmic prison most people don't even know exists. The Gnostics believed that every single person walking this planet right now is actually a divine being who has been tricked into forgetting their true nature. They taught that our entire reality, everything you see, touch, and experience, is nothing more than an elaborate trap designed to keep your soul recycling through endless lifetimes of suffering and ignorance.
Most people think death is either the end of consciousness or the beginning of some eternal afterlife in heaven or hell. But the Gnostics had a completely different story. They said that when your physical body dies, your soul doesn't just float upward to meet some bearded god sitting on a throne. Instead, it begins a dangerous journey through what they called the planetary spheres. 7 layers of reality controlled by cosmic entities whose only job is to prevent you from escaping back to your true home in the divine realm. And before we dive deeper into this rabbit hole, let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching this from? I'm curious about our global Sigil Sanctum community. Are you watching from a bustling city or somewhere remote? I find it fascinating how these ancient teachings about cosmic imprisonment somehow feel relevant no matter where we are on this planet.
If the Gnostics were right about the afterlife, then every major religion has been hiding or misunderstanding the true nature of death, and that means most souls remain trapped in cycles of reincarnation, never realizing they're prisoners in a false reality. Think about this for a moment. What if Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and every other mainstream religion has been unknowingly worshipping the very being who's keeping humanity enslaved? What if the God they call the Creator is actually just a cosmic warden running the ultimate prison system? The Gnostics didn't just believe this as some abstract philosophy. They had detailed instruction manuals for the afterlife, literal guidebooks that described exactly what your soul would encounter after death. These texts contained passwords, secret phrases, and hidden knowledge that they claimed were absolutely necessary for spiritual liberation. Without this gnosis, or divine knowledge, your soul would be completely defenseless against the beings waiting to intercept you after death.
According to their teachings, when you die, you don't just face some simple judgment where your good deeds are weighed against your bad ones. Instead, your soul has to fight its way through layers of cosmic guards called Archons, who will use every trick in the book to convince you to come back to Earth for another lifetime. They might appear as beings of light, claiming to be angels or even Jesus himself. They might show you visions of loved ones who need you to return, or present you with appealing scenarios for your next incarnation. But it's all deception, designed to keep you trapped in what the Gnostics called the Wheel of Fate. The most terrifying part is that these Archons don't just control what happens after death. They're actively manipulating your current life right now. They use astrology, social conditioning, religious dogma, and even your own emotions to keep you spiritually asleep. Every time you get angry, lustful, greedy, or fearful, you're feeding energy to these cosmic parasites who use your own life force to maintain their control over the material universe. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. The Gnostics taught that most people who think they're having religious or spiritual experiences are actually being deceived by these same Archons. That vision of Jesus you had? That might have been an Archon in disguise. That feeling of divine presence during prayer could be spiritual manipulation designed to keep you satisfied with false salvation. Even near-death experiences, which many people today see as proof of heaven, were viewed by Gnostics as previews of the very traps that souls need to avoid. If you're ready to explore these forbidden teachings that challenge everything you thought you knew, hit that subscribe button, because Sigil Sanctum is your guide through the hidden mysteries. We're going to dive into knowledge that was so dangerous, early Christian authorities spent centuries trying to wipe it off the face of the earth, and there's a reason they were so desperate to hide it, because once you understand what the Gnostics really taught, you can never look at death, religion, or reality itself the same way again. Picture this. It's December 1945, and an Egyptian farmer named Muhammad Ali is digging for fertilizer near the town of Nag Hammadi, about 75 miles north of Luxor. The ground is hard, and he's tired from a long day of work. His shovel hits something solid, not a rock, but something hollow. He keeps digging until he unearths a large red clay jar, about 6 feet tall, sealed with a bowl-shaped lid. For a moment he hesitates. Local legends warned that such jars might contain evil spirits or jinns that could bring terrible luck to anyone who opened them. But Muhammad Ali was a practical man who needed money more than he feared superstition. He smashed the jar with his shovel, and instead of evil spirits, out tumbled 13 leather-bound books, their pages made of papyrus and written in the ancient Coptic language. He had no idea that he'd just discovered the most significant religious find of the 20th century. A library of forbidden texts that had been deliberately buried around 400 CE to protect them from destruction by Orthodox Christian authorities.
These weren't just any old manuscripts. They contained the secret teachings of Christian Gnostics who lived between the 2nd and 4th centuries, people who claimed to have received direct revelation from the resurrected Christ about the true nature of reality and the afterlife. For over 1,600 years, these texts had been hidden in the Egyptian desert, waiting for someone to uncover teachings that early church leaders had declared so heretical that possessing them could mean torture and death. The discovery of these Nag Hammadi texts completely revolutionized our understanding of early Christianity. Before 1945, almost everything we knew about Gnostic beliefs came from the writings of their enemies, Orthodox church fathers like Irenaeus and Epiphanius, who wrote scathing critiques of Gnostic teachings but often misrepresented them. It was like trying to understand Buddhism by only reading books written by people who hated Buddhism. But suddenly we had the Gnostics speaking for themselves in their own words about their most sacred and secret doctrines. The Gnostics weren't your typical early Christians. They were like the underground philosophers of their time, mixing Christianity with ancient Greek wisdom, Jewish mysticism, and mystery religions from Egypt, Persia, and Mesopotamia. They claimed that mainstream Christianity had been corrupted almost from the beginning, and that the real message of Jesus had been hidden from ordinary believers who weren't ready to handle such revolutionary truth. Their leaders had names like Valentinus, Basilides, Carpocrates, and Marcion, and they ran secret schools in major cities like Alexandria, Rome, and Antioch. These weren't simple churches where people gathered for hymns and prayers. They were esoteric academies where advanced students spent years learning complex spiritual maps, practicing meditation techniques, and studying mystical texts that were never meant for public consumption. Valentinus, who lived around 100 to 160 CE, was probably the most influential Gnostic teacher. Born in Egypt and educated in Alexandria, the intellectual center of the ancient world, he moved to Rome around 140 CE and quickly gathered a huge following. His teachings were so sophisticated and his personal charisma so powerful that he came dangerously close to becoming the Bishop of Rome, what we'd call the Pope today. Church historians say he lost the election by just a few votes. Imagine how different the history of Christianity would be if Valentinus had won that election. Instead of the doctrine of Trinity and original sin, Christians today might be learning about the cosmic drama of Sophia and the liberation of divine sparks from material imprisonment. But Valentinus didn't just make up his teachings out of thin air. He claimed to have learned them from a student of the Apostle Paul named Theudas, creating a direct lineage back to the earliest Christian community. His followers developed incredibly detailed maps of what happens to the soul after death, based on visions and mystical experiences that they claimed revealed the true structure of cosmic reality. They had names for every spiritual realm, knew the specific powers and weaknesses of different Archons, and preserved the exact words that souls needed to speak when confronted by these cosmic guardians. These early Gnostics were heavily influenced by Plato's philosophy, particularly his teaching that the soul is trapped in the physical body like a prisoner in a cave. But they took this idea much further than Plato ever did. They said the entire material universe was a prison designed by a false god to keep souls from returning to their true divine home. This wasn't just philosophical speculation. They claimed to have received this knowledge through direct mystical experience and divine revelation. The Gnostic schools also drew heavily from ancient mystery religions like those found in Egypt and Greece. From the Egyptians, they borrowed the idea of the soul's journey after death through various realms and challenges. From Greek mysteries, they adopted the concept of secret initiation rituals that gradually revealed hidden truths to worthy candidates. From Persian Zoroastrianism, they took the notion of cosmic dualism, an eternal battle between light and darkness, spirit and matter, knowledge and ignorance. But what made Gnostic afterlife beliefs truly unique was how they combined all these influences into a coherent system that completely inverted traditional religious thinking. Instead of teaching people to obey the Creator God, they taught them to escape from Him. Instead of promising reward for faith and good works, they offered liberation through secret knowledge. Instead of preparing souls for judgment, they prepared them for cosmic rebellion against the very foundations of material existence. To understand what the Gnostics believed happens when you die, you first need to understand their absolutely mind-blowing cosmology, a spiritual map of reality so complex and detailed that it makes modern science fiction look simple by comparison. They taught that beyond our physical universe exists a realm of pure divine light called the pleroma, which means fullness in Greek. This isn't just heaven as most people imagine it, some pleasant place with clouds and harps. The pleroma is the ultimate source of all consciousness, all love and all knowledge. It's a dimension where divine beings called Aeons exist in perfect harmony, each one representing a different aspect of the ultimate, unknowable God. In the pleroma, there are typically 30 Aeons arranged in pairs called syzygies, each couple representing complementary divine qualities like depth and silence, mind and truth, word and life. These aren't separate gods competing for power, but rather different facets of the one true divine essence expressing itself through pure thought and spiritual energy. The pleroma is a realm where there's no time, no space, no physical matter, and no death, just eternal consciousness experiencing itself in infinite varieties of perfection. But here's where the Gnostic creation story takes a dramatic turn that would make Hollywood writers jealous. According to their mythology, one of these Aeons named Sophia, whose name means wisdom, made a cosmic mistake that changed everything. Sophia became curious about the ultimate Father, the unknowable source beyond all the other Aeons. But instead of pursuing this desire in partnership with her divine companion, she tried to reach the Father on her own, without permission and without the proper spiritual preparation. This act of independent desire caused Sophia to fall from the pleroma, and in her falling she accidentally gave birth to a flawed being called the Demiurge. The word Demiurge comes from Plato, where it meant a kind of craftsman god who shapes the material world. But the Gnostics turned this concept on its head. Their Demiurge wasn't a wise creator, he was an ignorant, arrogant being who thought he was the highest god simply because he couldn't see beyond the boundaries of his own limited realm. Cut off from the true divine light of the pleroma, the Demiurge used his mother Sophia's spiritual energy to create our physical universe. But because he was working from ignorance rather than divine wisdom, everything he made was flawed and temporary. He created time, which traps consciousness in sequential moments instead of eternal now. He created space, which separates beings from one another instead of allowing them to share unified consciousness. He created physical matter, which weighs down spiritual energy and makes it forget its divine origin. The most crucial part of this creation story is that the Demiurge genuinely believed he was the highest god. In one Gnostic text called the Apocryphon of John, he's quoted as declaring, "I am God and there is no other besides me." Sound familiar? This is exactly what the God of the Old Testament says repeatedly. The Gnostics were essentially claiming that the biblical creator wasn't the true divine source, but rather a cosmic imposter who didn't even realize his own mistake. Working under the Demiurge are beings called Archons, whose job is to maintain the prison system of material reality. The word Archon means ruler in Greek, and these entities function like a cosmic police force whose only purpose is to keep souls confused and trapped in physical incarnation. They're not necessarily evil in the way Christians think of demons, they're more like cosmic bureaucrats who sincerely believe they're doing important work by maintaining order in the universe. But from the soul's perspective, they're the ultimate obstacle to spiritual liberation. The Gnostics taught that there are typically 7 main archons, each one controlling a different planetary sphere that souls must pass through after death. These correspond roughly to the 7 classical planets visible to ancient astronomers: the Moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. But these aren't just physical celestial bodies. They represent different levels of consciousness and spiritual challenge that every soul encounters on its journey back to the pleroma. Each archon has specific powers, weaknesses, and methods of deception. The lunar archon, for example, controls emotions and memory, often trying to overwhelm departing souls with nostalgic visions of their earthly life to make them want to reincarnate. The solar archon presents himself as a being of ultimate light and love, claiming to be Christ or some other savior figure to trick souls into accepting a false salvation that keeps them trapped in lower spiritual realms. Now here's where Gnostic psychology gets really sophisticated. They divided all human beings into three categories based on what kind of soul they carried and how capable they were of achieving liberation after death. The majority of people were called hilics, which comes from the Greek word for matter. These are souls so completely identified with material existence that they can't even conceive of spiritual reality beyond the physical world. When hilics die, their consciousness simply dissolves back into the material elements. They don't have enough spiritual energy to maintain coherent existence without a physical body. This doesn't mean hilics are bad people, or that the Gnostics look down on them. Many hilics are kind, moral, and socially productive, but their consciousness is so thoroughly merged with material concerns, money, status, physical pleasure, social approval, that they've essentially become extensions of the material world itself. They might believe in God or practice religion, but their spirituality never penetrates beyond social conditioning and emotional comfort. Then there were the psychics. People with souls capable of spiritual growth, but still fundamentally bound by the laws and limitations of the Demiurge's creation. These souls have enough spiritual energy to survive death and continue existing in various afterlife states. They might become angels, spirits, or inhabitants of intermediate realms between Earth and the pleroma. They can achieve a kind of salvation and experience genuine spiritual development, but they're still operating within the overall prison system of material reality. Most religious people throughout history would fall into this psychic category. They have real spiritual experiences, practice genuine devotion, and can achieve states of consciousness that transcend ordinary physical awareness. But their spiritual framework is still defined by the Demiurge's rules, concepts like judgment, redemption, divine command, and eternal reward or punishment. They're like prisoners who've been promoted to trustee status within the jail, given more freedom and better conditions, but still fundamentally confined within the same system. Finally, there were the pneumatics, people who carried a special spark of divine light that came directly from the pleroma itself. The word comes from pneuma, meaning spirit or breath, and these souls possessed fragments of Sophia's own divine essence that had been scattered throughout the material world when she fell from the divine realm. These pneumatic souls had the potential to achieve true gnosis or divine knowledge, and their consciousness could completely escape the entire prison system when they died. But even for these special pneumatic souls, death wasn't automatic liberation. Having the potential for escape didn't guarantee success. They still had to navigate a treacherous journey through multiple levels of reality, each one guarded by Archons who would use every possible deception to convince them to turn back or accept some lesser form of salvation that would keep them trapped within the Demiurge's domain. This is why the Gnostic schools spent so much time teaching detailed maps of the afterlife journey, complete with the specific passwords, prayers, and mental techniques that souls would need to successfully navigate each level of spiritual challenge. So what actually happens when a pneumatic soul, someone with that divine spark, finally dies and begins the journey back to the pleroma? According to Gnostic texts like the Pistis Sophia and the Books of Zhu, death is just the beginning of the most dangerous adventure any consciousness can undertake. The moment your physical body stops functioning, your soul doesn't just float upward towards some heavenly light. Instead, you find yourself at the bottom of a cosmic obstacle course that was specifically designed to prevent your escape. The journey begins in what the Gnostics called the sphere of the moon, the first and most deceptive level of the afterlife. This isn't the physical moon you see in the sky, but rather a spiritual realm controlled by an Archon whose specialty is emotional manipulation. The moment your soul enters this sphere, you're bombarded with incredibly realistic visions of your earthly life. Every person you loved, every moment of happiness you experienced, every unfinished business that still tugs at your heart. The lunar Archon appears to you as deceased family members, beloved pets, or romantic partners, all begging you to stay with them or return to Earth to help them somehow. These aren't really your departed loved ones. They're psychological projections created by the Archon using your own memories and emotions against you. The being might show you visions of a perfect future incarnation where you could be reunited with lost loves, or present you with compelling reasons why the physical world still needs your presence. But here's the truly insidious part. Many of these visions feel more real and emotionally satisfying than your earthly life ever did. The Archon has access to your soul's deepest longings and unfulfilled desires, and can create experiences that seem to offer everything you ever wanted. Some souls become so enchanted by these lunar illusions that they voluntarily choose to reincarnate immediately, never even attempting to continue their journey to higher realms. The Gnostic texts provide specific countermeasures for surviving the lunar sphere. The soul must remember certain phrases like, "I am a child of the Father who is before all things, and I am a child of the pre-existent one." More importantly, the soul must maintain absolute emotional detachment, recognizing that all the beings and scenarios presented in this realm are fundamentally unreal, no matter how convincing they appear. Those who successfully resist the lunar archon's deceptions then ascend to the sphere of Mercury, where they encounter a completely different type of challenge. The Mercurial Archon specializes in intellectual confusion and false wisdom. This being appears as a brilliant teacher or enlightened guru, offering the soul profound-sounding explanations for the nature of reality. He might present himself as Jesus, Buddha, or any other spiritual figure the soul reveres, claiming to offer the final truth about existence. The Mercurial Archon's specialty is creating elaborate philosophical systems that sound incredibly sophisticated but actually lead nowhere. He offers the soul complex theories about karma, divine justice, cosmic evolution, or spiritual hierarchy, anything that will convince the soul to remain within the Demiurge's system while believing they've achieved some kind of enlightenment. Many souls who consider themselves spiritually advanced get trapped at this level, spending eons believing they're learning profound truths while actually remaining prisoners in a cosmic classroom. The password for passing through Mercury involves declaring, "I know myself, and I know from where I am, and I call upon the incorruptible Sophia who is in the Father." The soul must demonstrate that its knowledge comes not from learning or reasoning, but from direct remembrance of its divine origin. Next comes Venus, where the Archon of love and beauty presents the most seductive temptations. This being doesn't try to trick the soul with false emotions or misleading philosophies. Instead, it offers genuine spiritual experiences, ecstatic unions with divine beings, overwhelming feelings of cosmic love, beautiful visions of spiritual realms that exist just below the level of the true pleroma. These aren't illusions in the same way the lunar visions were. They're real spiritual states that can provide genuine fulfillment and happiness, but that's exactly why the Venusian sphere is so dangerous. The soul can spend eternity in these blissful spiritual states, never realizing that they're still within the prison system of the Demiurge. It's like being offered a luxurious cell with all the amenities instead of actual freedom. Many souls choose to remain at this level because the experience is so satisfying that they lose all desire for anything beyond it. The solar sphere presents perhaps the most challenging test of all. Here, the Archon appears as the ultimate divine being, a radiant figure claiming to be the source of all light, love, and consciousness. This being doesn't try to seduce or confuse the soul. Instead, it offers what appears to be complete spiritual fulfillment and union with the highest divine principle. The solar Archon might appear as Christ in glory, as the Hindu concept of Brahman, or as the Buddhist notion of ultimate enlightenment. The soul is offered the chance to merge completely with this being, to become one with what appears to be the source of all existence. And for souls who haven't received proper Gnostic instruction, this offer is almost impossible to refuse. It seems to represent everything that spiritual seeking has been pointing toward: complete transcendence of individual limitations and union with ultimate reality. But the Gnostics taught that this solar being is still just another Archon, albeit the most powerful and convincing one. The true pleroma lies beyond even this apparent ultimate reality. Souls who accept the solar Archon's offer achieve a kind of cosmic consciousness, but they're still trapped within the Demiurge's creation, mistaking a part of the system for the whole. The higher spheres, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, present increasingly subtle tests that are harder to describe in ordinary language. These Archons don't use crude deceptions or obvious temptations. Instead, they present the soul with genuine spiritual truths, but incomplete ones. They offer real power, authentic wisdom, and actual divine experiences, but always within frameworks that keep the soul operating within the cosmic prison. The Martian Archon tests the soul's relationship to spiritual power, offering positions of cosmic authority and the ability to guide other souls. The Jovian Archon presents tests related to cosmic justice and divine law, tempting the soul with the chance to become a judge or administrator within the spiritual hierarchy. The Saturnian Archon offers the ultimate test, the opportunity to become a creator god yourself, to have your own universe to rule and souls to guide. Each of these offers represents a genuine spiritual achievement that would satisfy most religious seekers, but the Gnostics insisted that accepting any of these positions, no matter how exalted they might seem, means remaining forever trapped within the Demiurge's system, never reaching the true source of divine consciousness. Throughout this entire journey, the soul must remember not just the correct passwords and sacred formulas, but the fundamental Gnostic insight that all systems, hierarchies, and levels of reality within the material cosmos are ultimately prisons, no matter how beautiful or spiritually satisfying they might appear. The goal isn't to find the best possible position within the existing order, but to escape from the entire framework of created existence and return to the uncreated divine source. The Gnostics didn't just have theories about the afterlife. They developed incredibly sophisticated practices for preparing the soul to successfully navigate the post-death journey. These weren't your typical religious rituals involving prayers and offerings to divine beings. Instead, they were advanced psychological and spiritual techniques designed to fundamentally rewire consciousness itself, enabling the soul to maintain awareness and purpose even after the death of the physical body. The most sacred of these practices was called the bridal chamber, which has been completely misunderstood by most modern scholars who interpret it as some kind of sexual ritual. In reality, the bridal chamber was a complex spiritual exercise designed to reunite the fragmented aspects of the soul while still alive in the physical body. The Gnostics taught that every human soul was originally an androgynous divine being that had been split into male and female components when it fell into material existence. During the bridal chamber ritual, advanced practitioners would use specific meditation techniques, sacred words, and visualizations to experientially reunite these separated aspects of their consciousness. This wasn't about physical gender or sexuality, it was about healing the fundamental split in awareness that keeps souls trapped in dualistic thinking. The bride represented the soul's receptive, intuitive aspect, while the groom represented its active, knowing aspect. The mystical marriage between these inner principles created a unified consciousness capable of recognizing and resisting the Archons' deceptions. Practitioners of the bridal chamber would spend months or even years learning to maintain this unified state of consciousness during daily life. They practiced dying while alive, deliberately loosening their identification with the physical body and social personality while maintaining full awareness and intentionality. This was crucial preparation for the actual death experience, when the soul would need to navigate the afterlife journey without the familiar anchors of physical sensation and earthly identity. Another essential practice was memorizing the 5 seals, specific sacred formulas that served as spiritual passwords for passing through different levels of archonic control. These weren't just words to be recited, but consciousness-altering mantras that could actually transform the soul's vibrational frequency, making it invisible or unrecognizable to the cosmic guardians who monitored the boundaries between spiritual realms.
The first seal was related to overcoming the power of fate and astrology. The Gnostics taught that the Archons used astrological influences to control human behavior and destiny, keeping souls locked into predictable patterns of reaction and reincarnation. By mastering the first seal, practitioners could break free from these cosmic influences and begin operating from pure conscious choice rather than predetermined fate. The second seal provided protection against emotional manipulation during the death journey. This involved learning to recognize the difference between genuine spiritual emotion and artificially induced feelings created by the Archons to cloud judgment. Practitioners would deliberately expose themselves to intense emotional states during meditation, learning to observe these experiences with complete detachment while maintaining full feeling sensitivity. The third seal was perhaps the most challenging. It involved mastering the illusion of time itself. The Gnostics believed that linear time was one of the primary tools the Demiurge used to keep souls trapped in sequential thinking and cause and effect reasoning. Advanced practitioners learned to experience consciousness from the perspective of eternity, where all moments exist simultaneously, and the soul's true nature is revealed as timeless awareness. The fourth seal related to transcending the illusion of separate identity. This involved a practice similar to what Buddhists call emptiness meditation, but with a specifically Gnostic twist. Instead of simply recognizing the illusory nature of the ego, practitioners learned to identify with the divine spark itself, the fragment of Sophia's light that represented their true essence beyond all personal history and individual characteristics. The fifth and final seal was the most secret and powerful. It was the practice of recognizing the Demiurge himself and refusing to be intimidated by his apparent authority. This required not just intellectual understanding, but direct experiential knowledge of the difference between the true unknowable divine source and the false creator God who ruled the material cosmos. Practitioners who mastered this seal could look directly at the cosmic authorities without fear, knowing them to be fundamentally powerless over consciousness that had remembered its true origin.
The Gnostic schools also taught specific breathing techniques designed to separate consciousness from physical embodiment gradually and safely. These practices, called pneumatic exercises, involved learning to breathe light instead of air, drawing divine energy directly from the pleroma rather than depending on the physical atmosphere of the material world. Advanced practitioners could maintain full consciousness while their breathing and heartbeat slowed to almost imperceptible levels, essentially practicing death while remaining physically alive. Perhaps the most radical of all Gnostic death preparations was the practice of cosmic rebellion, deliberately breaking social and religious conditioning to free the soul from unconscious obedience to archonic authority. This didn't mean becoming antisocial or destructive, but rather learning to operate from inner divine guidance instead of external rules and expectations.
Some Gnostic groups practiced deliberate poverty, not because they believed material wealth was evil, but because they wanted to break their attachment to the economic systems that the Archons used to control human behavior. Others practiced celibacy, not because they viewed sexuality as sinful, but because they wanted to redirect their creative energy towards spiritual transformation rather than physical reproduction, which they saw as the primary mechanism for trapping souls in repeated incarnations. The most advanced practitioners engaged in what they called sacred blasphemy, deliberately violating religious taboos and social conventions to demonstrate their freedom from all external spiritual authority. They might eat foods forbidden by religious law, speak names that were considered too sacred to pronounce, or perform rituals that inverted conventional religious practices. The point wasn't to be rebellious for its own sake, but to prove to themselves and the cosmic authorities that they recognized no power greater than the divine spark within their own consciousness. All of these practices culminated in the ultimate Gnostic death preparation, the great work of transforming oneself into what they called a living resurrection. This meant achieving, while still alive, the same liberated state of consciousness that other souls could only hope to attain after death. Practitioners who accomplished this transformation became essentially deathless, not because their physical bodies wouldn't die, but because their consciousness was no longer identified with or dependent upon physical existence. These living resurrections were said to possess incredible spiritual powers, including the ability to travel consciously through the planetary spheres while still alive, to communicate directly with other souls who had successfully escaped the material cosmos, and to serve as guides for other souls attempting the post-death journey. They were the Gnostic equivalent of what other traditions might call enlightened masters or realized beings, but with the crucial difference that their realization specifically involved liberation from the cosmic system itself, rather than harmony with it.
You might think that these ancient Gnostic teachings about the afterlife are just historical curiosities, interesting relics from a bygone age that have no relevance to our modern scientific world. But the truth is that Gnostic ideas about death and consciousness have been quietly influencing Western thought for centuries, and they're experiencing a remarkable revival in completely unexpected places today. One of the most fascinating areas where Gnostic afterlife concepts have resurfaced is in contemporary near-death experience research. Starting in the 1970s, medical professionals began systematically documenting cases of people who died clinically but were then revived, bringing back detailed reports of their experiences during the period when they were technically dead. What's remarkable is how many of these modern accounts match the specific details that Gnostic texts described nearly 2,000 years ago. Dr. Kenneth Ring, one of the pioneering researchers in this field, documented numerous cases of people who reported encountering beings of light during their near-death experiences who tried to convince them to return to earthly life. In many cases, these beings presented elaborate justifications for why the person needed to reincarnate, often showing them visions of future accomplishments or relationships that would supposedly require their return to physical existence. This matches exactly what the Gnostics said about the lunar and solar Archons, who specialize in using emotional manipulation and false spiritual authority to prevent souls from escaping the reincarnation cycle. Even more intriguing are the cases where people reported feeling suspicious of the beings they encountered during their near-death experiences. Some individuals described sensing that the beautiful spiritual realms they were shown were somehow artificial or incomplete, lacking some essential quality that they couldn't quite identify. Others reported feeling that the beings claiming to be angels or divine messengers were not quite what they appeared to be, despite their overwhelming presence and apparent benevolence. Dr. P.M.H. Atwater, another prominent near-death researcher, documented what she called unpleasant near-death experiences, where people encountered beings who seemed to be testing their spiritual development or trying to convince them to accept certain beliefs about the nature of reality. These accounts often feature elaborate spiritual bureaucracies where souls are processed through various levels of judgment and assignment, exactly matching the Gnostic descriptions of the Archonic system that manages reincarnation. But the most striking parallel between modern near-death research and ancient Gnostic teachings involves the small percentage of people who report completely transcending the typical near-death experience structure. These individuals describe moving beyond the tunnels of light, past the beings who normally guide the death process, into realms of consciousness that they say cannot be described in any human language. They often return with the conviction that most spiritual and religious systems, no matter how sophisticated, are still operating within a limited framework that falls short of ultimate reality. The influence of Gnostic thought can also be traced through the development of depth psychology, particularly in the work of Carl Jung. Although Jung never explicitly endorsed Gnostic cosmology, his psychological theories were deeply influenced by Gnostic concepts. His idea of the collective unconscious containing both helpful and harmful archetypal forces mirrors the Gnostic teaching about beneficial aeons and deceptive archons operating in the psychic realm. His emphasis on individuation, the process of integrating unconscious contents to achieve psychological wholeness, directly parallels the Gnostic goal of reuniting fragmented soul components to prepare for spiritual liberation. Jung's late work, particularly his 7 Sermons to the Dead, reads like a modern Gnostic text, complete with warnings about false spiritual authorities and the importance of achieving psychological independence from collective religious and social conditioning. He explicitly stated that he considered the Gnostics to be the first depth psychologists, recognizing that they were exploring the same fundamental questions about consciousness and spiritual development that he was investigating through his clinical work. Today, there are actually functioning Gnostic churches and organizations that claim direct continuation of the ancient tradition. The Ecclesia Gnostica, founded in Los Angeles in 1953, performs versions of the ancient Gnostic sacraments and teaches preparation techniques for the afterlife journey. Their ordination rituals reportedly include instruction in the specific passwords and sacred formulas that souls need to navigate the post-death realms, based on translations of the original Nag Hammadi texts. The French organization called the Gnostic movement, which has branches in multiple countries, teaches what they call conscious death, techniques for maintaining awareness and intentionality during the dying process. Their practices combine ancient Gnostic methods with modern psychological insights, teaching students to recognize and resist the various forms of spiritual deception that they believe still operate in the afterlife realms today. Perhaps most significantly, Gnostic themes have become increasingly prominent in popular culture, often in ways that introduce these concepts to millions of people without them even realizing the source. The Matrix trilogy, for example, is essentially a modern retelling of the Gnostic creation myth, with the machine world representing the Demiurge's false reality, Agent Smith functioning as an Archon figure, and Neo's journey representing the soul's awakening to its true divine nature and eventual escape from the cosmic prison. The TV series Westworld explores similar themes, with artificial intelligences gradually awakening to the realization that their entire reality has been programmed by creators who keep them trapped in endless cycles of scripted experiences. The show's exploration of consciousness, free will, and the nature of reality directly echoes Gnostic teachings about souls being trapped in a false cosmos by beings who control their experiences and memories. Even more mainstream entertainment has begun incorporating Gnostic concepts. The Marvel Cinematic Universe frequently features storylines about cosmic entities who present themselves as gods but are revealed to be manipulative beings with their own agendas. The DC Comics character John Constantine regularly encounters beings who claim divine authority but turn out to be cosmic con artists, trying to claim souls for their own purposes. But perhaps the most significant modern development related to Gnostic afterlife teachings is happening in the fields of consciousness research and quantum physics. Scientists studying the nature of consciousness are increasingly questioning whether physical reality is as fundamental as we assume, with some researchers proposing that consciousness itself might be the primary component of existence, with physical matter being a secondary phenomenon. The physicist Nick Bostrom's simulation hypothesis suggests that our entire reality might be an artificial construct running inside some kind of cosmic computer system, created by beings whose true nature and motivations we cannot understand. This idea has gained serious attention from prominent scientists and philosophers, essentially proposing a technological version of the Gnostic teaching that material reality is an artificial prison created by entities who are not what they claim to be. Recent developments in artificial intelligence have made these concepts seem less far-fetched than they might have just a few decades ago. As we create increasingly sophisticated virtual worlds and AI entities that can exhibit apparently conscious behavior, the idea that our own reality might be some kind of simulation created by more advanced beings seems less like fantasy and more like a genuine possibility that deserves serious consideration. The resurgence of interest in psychedelic research has also contributed to renewed attention to Gnostic concepts. Many people who undergo experiences with substances like DMT, psilocybin, or ayahuasca report encounters with entities that bear striking resemblances to the Archons described in ancient Gnostic texts. These beings often appear to have their own agendas and attempt to convince the experiencer to accept certain beliefs or make specific life choices, just as the Gnostic texts warned about spiritual entities who use their apparent authority to manipulate souls. The point isn't to fear death or build elaborate mythologies around cosmic conspiracies. It's to recognize that consciousness itself might be imprisoned in material reality through mechanisms far more sophisticated than most people realize. The Gnostics weren't trying to create another religion or belief system to compete with existing ones. They were attempting something far more radical: to wake people up to the possibility that all belief systems, all spiritual authorities, and all cosmic hierarchies might be part of an elaborate control mechanism designed to prevent consciousness from recognizing its true unlimited nature. When you really understand what the Gnostics were teaching, you realize that their message wasn't ultimately about the afterlife at all. It was about right now, about this moment of consciousness reading these words and trying to make sense of existence. They were saying that the same forces that will try to deceive your soul after death are already operating in your current life, using religion, social conditioning, emotional manipulation, and even apparently spiritual experiences to keep you from recognizing who you really are. The cosmic deception the Gnostics warned about isn't something that happens only in some otherworldly realm after you die. It's happening right now in the way you've been taught to think about yourself, reality, and what's possible for human consciousness. Every time you accept limitations on your awareness because some authority figure told you that's just how things are, every time you choose comfortable beliefs over uncomfortable truths, every time you let fear or desire override your inner knowing, you're experiencing the same archonic control that they said would try to trap your soul in the afterlife. This is why the Gnostic path was always about liberation in this lifetime, not just preparation for some future spiritual journey. They taught that true spiritual awakening means recognizing that you are not a separate being hoping to eventually achieve connection with the divine. You are already a fragment of divine consciousness that has temporarily forgotten its true nature. The spiritual journey isn't about becoming something different, it's about remembering what you have always been beneath all the layers of conditioning and limitation. The most revolutionary aspect of Gnostic teaching is its insistence that you don't need any external authority to validate your spiritual realization. Not religious institutions, not spiritual teachers, not cosmic beings, not even gods themselves. The divine spark within your own consciousness is the ultimate spiritual authority, and anything that tries to convince you otherwise, no matter how impressive or benevolent it appears, is potentially part of the very system that keeps consciousness trapped in limitation. This doesn't mean rejecting all spiritual teachings or becoming cynical about mystical experiences. It means developing what you could call spiritual discernment, the ability to recognize the difference between experiences that expand your sense of freedom and possibility versus those that, however beautiful or meaningful they might seem, ultimately make you more dependent on external sources of validation and guidance. The Gnostics would say that if you can grasp this principle while you're still alive, then you've already achieved the most important aspect of preparing for the death journey. Because once you see the cosmic deception for what it is, a system that uses your own desires for security, meaning, and spiritual fulfillment against you, you realize that true liberation doesn't come from finding the right beliefs or achieving the right states of consciousness. It comes from recognizing that you are the awareness in which all beliefs and states of consciousness appear and disappear. You are not a soul trying to escape from a cosmic prison. You are the divine consciousness that is dreaming the entire cosmic prison into existence, including the character who thinks they need to escape from it. This is perhaps the deepest secret that the Gnostic texts were trying to convey through all their elaborate mythologies and complex cosmologies. The pleroma, the realm of divine fullness that souls are supposedly trying to return to, isn't actually somewhere else. It's the natural state of consciousness when it stops believing in the reality of its own limitations. The Archons, the cosmic forces trying to keep souls imprisoned, don't actually have any power except what consciousness gives them by believing they are real and threatening. The ultimate Gnostic teaching about the afterlife is that there is no afterlife in the way most people imagine it. There is only consciousness appearing to itself as various experiences of limitation and liberation, separation and unity, imprisonment and freedom. Death is simply another experience appearing within this same unlimited awareness that you are right now, reading these words and wondering what it all means. When you truly understand this, then you realize that the most powerful preparation for death isn't memorizing passwords for getting past cosmic guardians or learning techniques for maintaining awareness during the dissolution of the body. It's simply recognizing, right here and right now, that you are already the deathless awareness that all experiences appear within. You are already free, already home, already whole. Everything else, including these very teachings about spiritual liberation, is just consciousness playing with itself, exploring what it's like to seemingly forget and then remember its own infinite nature. That's the final joke that the Gnostics were trying to share through all their serious-sounding warnings about cosmic deception. The ultimate cosmic deception is the idea that you need to be liberated from anything at all. You are already the liberation you seek, already the divine being you hope to become, already the consciousness you think you need to achieve. The only question is whether you're willing to stop believing in the elaborate story of limitation long enough to notice what you actually are. And if you can glimpse that recognition even for a moment while reading this, then you've already accomplished the most important work that any soul could ever hope to achieve, either in this lifetime or in any afterlife that consciousness might dream up next.